For me, I suppose there's 2 points of letting go, really, when you're recording something. It's letting go of the kind of exploration and the writing process and the thought you're trying to pop into every corner of what you're doing and saying, okay, that's enough now. That thought is complete. This phase is complete. And that can be difficult, but I've never found that be an unnatural process with that part. I feel like you kind of not run out of road, but run out of amendments eventually, and the songs are fully formed in my own perception of them.
That was Rosa Nutty, the voice behind the theme music of Irish Stew and the new album, World Still Blue. And I'm her uncle, Martin Nutty.
Hey, and I'm John Lee. Welcome to another Global Irish Nation conversation here on Irish Stew. This episode of Irish Stew is sponsored by Ireland of the Welcomes magazine, celebrating 70 years of Irish history, tradition, culture, and community with outstanding photography and inspired writing. Get Ireland of the Welcomes delivered to your door or give a gift subscription and keep the Irish legacy alive for generations to come. Subscribe today online at irelandofthewelcomes.com. Hey everyone, welcome back to another Global Irish Nation conversation here on Irish Stew. We're recording this on the 20th of November. Temperatures just barely above freezing in New York today as we head into a holiday weekend, the Thanksgiving holiday. We're going to warm things up with a great conversation today, and it's a voice that's very familiar to anyone who listens to Irish Stew. I am talking about Martin Nutty, but I'm also talking about our guest as well.
And hello, everybody. I am delighted to have Rosa Nutty joining us. As you can probably tell from the last name, there's a high likelihood that this young lady is actually related to me, and she is indeed. She is my niece. Rosa is a talented musician. She has released 2 EPs in 2015, Bunny, and in 2017, Pips. And now 5 years later, she has released her first album, World Still Blue. And we're delighted to have Rosa join us. And of course, as you probably listened to the theme music on the run into this episode, that indeed was Rosa Nutty singing Oscuelga, as they say, or in Irish. And so welcome to our theme musician and independent musician, Rosa Nutty.
Oh, thanks so much. That was such a nice introduction, Martin. And hello, John. I'm delighted to be on talking for once and not just singing, as I do week after week.
So we're going to kick this off with the basic question. Classification. When people ask me about your music, Rosa, I call it indie, but I never actually checked with you if that's how you see your music and what you think even about these categories that people use. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because I don't think I've ever actually checked with myself, to be perfectly honest. Like, there's so many subcategories now in genre, in defining genres. And I suppose, I mean, I've had friends call my music sad girl music, which incorporates a whole other thing. But in terms of like actual classification, I would say it's maybe alternative pop music, but I don't identify with that really, if that makes any sense. It's not something that guides my writing or guides my understanding of what I do. So it tends to be something that helps other people digest it, particularly people who haven't heard it yet, but it's not something I identify too closely with. I think you just kind of write what you write, unless you're intentionally writing, jazz or trad or, defining yourself by one particular style or direction. But for what I do, I think it's kind of meaningless. I kind of write lyrics of my feelings and put some music behind it and hope it sounds like a song, that kind of way.
So talk to us then a little bit about influences. You can't talk to a musician without talking about who they're influenced by and how that drives the songs that you've created.
I think the main drive for me is kind of authentic lyricism. That'd be that's job well done for me if I feel like I've achieved that. And I suppose that is definitely reflected in the music I would spend most of my time listening to. So the likes of Elliott Smith, American artist Elliott Smith, who was kind of huge in the 90s and noughties, really kind of everyday lyrics, but just creates a really solid atmospheric world where his music exists. And it's almost quite cinematic, and you can really feel the kind of emotional landscape of the music itself, and it's matched with really clever lyricism. So I've always loved that. There's an artist I'm listening to a lot at the moment called Kevin Morby, who I think you could say all the same things of. He's a Midwest American musician, and he writes these songs that just really have a whole world unto themselves. But then, I mean, that's two men in a row. I've outdone myself there, because I mostly would be kind of in the Joni Mitchell, Kate Bush arena, like women out doing their own thing. I think are just so inspiring, and I absolutely love their idiosyncratic approaches to what they do. And yeah, so kind of songwriters that kind of mind themselves for pertinent lyrics seems to be kind of my guiding light, influence wise.
Rosa, what are some of the other influences you feel outside of music in terms of other forms of art, the nature, the weather, the seasons? How do those, what else plays into your music besides other musical influences?
That's actually such a nice question. So my background, my college degree, the reason I studied was that I actually got into art history. So I'm really
here.
Yeah. Oh, really?
As did I.
Excellent. So I had a very kind of visual art kind of focus for a lot of years, and really, really love how that informed the way I kind of see things. And so that was kind of in everything I do. Like, I remember my first week of college, one of our lecturers saying to us, you know, you chose a really good course, because by the time you're finished here, you'll never look at the world the same. And I remember thinking, like, God, that's a big call, you know, but it was true, because you kind of learn these ways of navigating the world and being able to, you know, visually gauge history and different significances. And yeah, it was great. So I think that kind of geared me up for kind of thinking in a certain way, I suppose. But if anyone has been paying attention to my social media, there's probably been an overemphasis on my move to Cavan to write this particular album. And I live here in a very remote location, very, like, surrounded by trees and darkness in winter and a lot of space, really. And I definitely can hear that in the album, I have to say. Like, I think it sounds a little bit isolated, but not in a negative sense. Like, it does just sound like the songs are being written from the perspective of being kind of a little bit removed, a little bit detached. So I definitely feel like that's impacted the overall sound of the music. But I'm the kind of person also who, you know, if there's nice light coming through the window, I comment on it. You know, I'm really kind of into the kind of seasonal shifts and daily shift of light and everything. Like, I love nature, and I absolutely love November. I've been talking about that for a couple of weeks now. So yeah, it's definitely in everything I do, I have to say. So yeah, I love the question.
Speaking about rural or remote Cavan, you kind of also grew up in remote Dublin.
Yeah.
Is that a fair description? And tell us about that.
Definitely. If I was ever telling anyone where we're from North County Dublin, the farmland of Dublin. And I always say it's the part of Dublin that Dubs don't know exists. It's up on a hill. I think my dad chose to live there because it was the least likely place to flood and most likely place to get snow in Dublin. But it is rural. It was a farming community. But at the same time, from the upstairs in our house, you can see the lights of Dublin City. So I suppose that connectivity to the city, a city I love a lot, always made it feel like it was kind of attached, if you know what I mean. Whereas where I am here definitely feels like it's out on its own, and that has its own benefits too. But Garristown is kind of a farming community unto itself, but with quick access into the city. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, I think.
Yeah, we had a guest on, actually, who grew up in St. Margaret's, which is right next door to where you are, John McCourt, who is a Joycean scholar. So it was kind of interesting, him talking about the access to Dublin how you could be in Dublin in half an hour, but you were living way out in the country, or at least it felt way out in the country.
Yeah.
But I want to step away from the conversation a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to play some music. And I want to start off with the track Utah. And I'm playing this quite selfishly because it has a particular meaning for me. So we're going to play a bit, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk.
We were in Utah watching the bulb flicker. Everyone felt it like the sun. We were in Utah while the world got quicker. There'll be time to worry when the holiday is done. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, oh, oh.
And that was Utah from World Still Blue. Rosa, tell me a little bit about that track.
So,
Why is the bulb flickering?
so as you know, Martin, you and I were in Utah at the point at which the pandemic was kind of just starting to kick off. So we had a trip scheduled for a hiking holiday. And it was around the time where it was still a little bit ambiguous about what the right calls were, because we couldn't obviously gauge the scale of what was about to happen. So we did decide to go to Utah around the start of March. But as soon as we landed, it became very apparent that the threat of what we were worried about was rapidly starting to increase. And the reference to the bulb flickering is kind of a sensation I had. We were having such a beautiful time, kind of like out in these red rocks that were just, mind blowing and surreal and amazing. But I had a sense, and I think we all had a sense, wasn't unique to me, of kind of an impending doom. And the bulb flickering is kind of like a metaphor for when in a horror film, I said that's so Irish. I was thinking earlier about the stew versus stew thing, and I'm after saying film. Oh no.
Hey, John, people make fun of our pronunciation of stew, right?
I'm just going to jump in here for a second. It's sort of a little bit off track, but I saw that Martin Nutty was slagging you for your accent. I heard that on the Spotlight podcast. Please tell me about this. This is so unfair.
So unfair, John. Thank you for picking that up. I feel like you've really got my back in this interview. I was completely unaware of my use of, not my use, but my pronunciation of the word lovely. Martin thinks I really emphasize the dubness of it. So every time I say lovely, he goes, lovely after me. I do the same back for his stew pronunciation, because it was far from stew you were wearing, Martin. Stew the whole way. But sorry, I digress. But the idea behind the bulb flickering was essentially that in a horror film, when the monster is kind of approaching or already in the house, the kind of environment gives the nod. That was the kind of underlying atmosphere of our trip, but we were still having this amazing time.
Rosa, just to quickly, I have such an Irish association with the pandemic. It just because it was coming over here. I was at a Northern Ireland event 10 days before St. Patrick's Day, and people were starting to do the elbow bumping, kind of not sure what to do. And then there was a big party 1 week before St. Patrick's Day where it had just been called the pandemic. And then by that night, the St. Patrick's Day parade had been canceled. So I have always had this very Irish association for the onset of the pandemic, unfortunately.
It was the same here, John, because we were actually in Utah, but the Taoiseach came out, I think, actually on St. Patrick's Day and announced a lot of the kind of very extreme closures and shutdowns and stuff like that. So I think we associate it with St. Patrick's Day here too, to some degree, like the kind of most dystopic kind of coverage happened around that time for us too. So I share that with you for sure.
So talking about COVID and the pandemic, you put out a EP that I referenced earlier in 2017 called Pips. And now it's been 5 years since you released some new music. I'm assuming some of that had to do with the pandemics, but tell us how that played out.
Yeah, absolutely. 5 years is a long time, and if you do the maths, you'll realize that the pandemic can only account for about 40% of it. So
what's your excuse?
Yeah, exactly. I'm getting to it. But I moved down here with the express view of like putting some very good time and space and energy into writing something, writing an album, and really putting a lot of thought into it. And I did do that. I did do that, but I think I did go down a bit of a rabbit hole. Like I wrote a lot more songs and feature on the final album, of course. And because so much time had kind of passed between the beginning of the project and the kickoff of the pandemic, some of them just actually genuinely didn't feel relevant to me anymore. By the time it did kick off, and then a kind of new period of writing in that isolation felt necessary and a lot more honest than some of the more kind of frivolous, not topical songs that I had written previously. Like 5 years is a massive amount of time for someone for their perspective to stay static. You know what I mean? And I think there was so much going on, and the reality for everybody had changed so much that I didn't think it would be honest to release an album that didn't have a touch of that in it, because where was I if not in isolation with everybody else in all that time? So the likes of Utah, obviously, Something Good to Feel, Supermoon, World Still Blue, the title track, they were all written in isolation, which sounds very dramatic, but they were all written within that kind of that environment. And I think that I'm happy to have come out of that 5 years with that kind of focus on it, because that's the reality of the time that was.
You mentioned World Still Blue. It's kind of fun for us on Irish Stew is we make connections with past episodes when we're talking to our current guests. Martin mentioned John McCord already. We had an Irish-American astronaut on, Katie Coleman. She was a musician as well as an astronaut. She played the tin whistle of Paddy Maloney and the wooden flute of Matt Malloy from the Chieftains aboard the International Space Station.
It's amazing.
And she described in a lot of detail and a lot of different times that view from space. And I understand that recollection and those kinds of observations were the influence for the title of your album.
Yeah, absolutely. I particularly in the kind of winter months here, it does. I talk about Cavan like it's this other world. It isn't. Okay, it's a very lovely, normal place, but we are very, very isolated where we particularly are, and it gets very, very dark in winter. And I suppose the combination of winter and being kind of in isolation here meant there was a lot of kind of dark sky and time for contemplation. And I suppose there was no possibility of actual travel. So kind of vicarious travel came in forms of books and films and things like that for people. My mobile phone has basically ruined my attention span for books at the moment. I'm regaining that as a New Year's resolution. So I ended up reading online a lot of very succinct accounts of astronauts kind of viewing the Earth from space, and kind of what a transformative experience that actually is. I suppose I also would have kind of a very potent climate anxiety too in all of that that was going on at that time and now. So whenever I'm thinking of solutions to obviously what is a global planetary issue, I always kind of, my brain fixes on looking at it from afar too. So with that in mind, those kind of astronaut accounts give me that peace and give me that kind of potential that you can view the Earth from a different perspective. And I was spending just a lot of time with that kind of line of thought. So yeah, that's what inspired the name.
Well, in your glowing review of your album in the Irish Times, it talks about a sense of optimism in the face of impending gloom.
Yeah. Yes, it does. So yeah, I think when I finished writing the album, I would say I was thinking overall, World Still Blue. If you plan out far enough, everything is still full of potential. But I have to say, if I'm being just 100% honest, just with the trajectory of things at the moment, I'm definitely feeling a good old pressure of the gloom, to be honest. So the overall album statement is that, but I would like a little bit more of a top up of my positivity in the review for sure. I think things are very complicated at the moment and feel like they're at some sort of boiling point on a few couple of issues that are very hard to ignore in your day to day. So yeah, too much of a downer potentially is an answer there.
Why don't we do this? Let's listen to another song now. We're going to play Deciding to Change.
I wrote a recipe. It was too sweet. I made an enemy. You two should meet. I bought myself sunflowers. I put them in the vase that you had to super glue when I wasn't in the house.
And that was an extract from Deciding to Change. And my question, Rosa, about this, I was a little curious. There's a line in there about doing an introduction to an enemy. What's going on? Who are we talking to?
About?
And who is the enemy?
I think so. The lyrics of that, just honestly to remind myself. So I wrote a recipe. It was too sweet. I made an enemy. You two should meet. Yeah. That whole stanza, that whole verse, I'm elevating my art there. Did you see that just subtly? Stanza. That whole verse is essentially about like a self-defeating attitude that's just very flippant and nonchalant and kind of like, you know, I made an enemy, you two should meet, like everyone's my enemy. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like very negative, not self-deprecating, but just kind of like in the slums with yourself, basically. So that's what it's about. It's actually not about anything specific at all. I have no enemies, Martin. None.
You know, your parents asked me to find out about that. They were equally disturbed by the lyrics, you know.
Yeah, I always hope that my family aren't reading them too closely. Yeah, cause for concern.
I kind of want to flip back to the whole challenge, you know, of releasing music out into the wild after 5 years, right? There is the pleasure of the creative process itself, but at a certain point, you have to be willing to let it go.
Yes.
And then once you let it go, then you have to encourage people to listen. So talk about letting go. And talk about the challenges of getting people to actually listen.
Yeah, for me, I suppose there's 2 points of letting go, really, when you're recording something. It's letting go of the kind of exploration and the writing process and the kind of thought you're kind of trying to pop into every corner of what you're doing and saying, okay, that's enough now. That thought is complete. This phase is complete. And that can be difficult, but I've never found that be an unnatural process. And with that part, I feel like you kind of not run out of road, but run out of amendments eventually. And the songs are fully formed in your own, or I can't speak for anybody else, but are fully formed in my own perception of them. And it doesn't feel like there's anything else to do. And then at that point you would head into the studio. In between these points, I always insert about 3 months of worrying and then I do the next part. So then into the studio and working with the guys, which was, we had recorded the album semi-live. So it was a lot of playing together and there was no click track or anything like that. So very immersive, mindful experience that was brilliant for someone like me who would try and overthink it. You can't, because you're just playing with other people in tandem. There's nothing to distract from that. So that was brilliant. So that went quite quickly. And then the kind of final letting go, and the one that I probably find the most difficult, and you definitely already know this because we've talked about it a good bit, but the releasing of it and the promoting of it and the approaching people about it, I do find that quite difficult. And it's not because you don't think the work can stand on its own, because I'm far enough into my journey as a creative person to know that how it's received is just one part, and that if I'm motivated by how it's received, the process of making the next thing is already destroyed. You have to be just being honest to yourself and producing whatever comes out, and that is that process. But at the same time, you do have to put a lot of energy into making sure that it has the life it should have. Not everything's going to take fire, but you do want it to be in front of as many people as possible. And I think when you're writing lyrics that are so, when you're writing music that's so introspective, and when it feels very personal, and when it feels like you've labored over it and it's your thing, it can be kind of difficult to put your energy behind saying, look at this, look at me, listen to this. Like I find that quite hard. But I've done it. I have had a couple of pep talks from some concerned members of the family, Martin, about getting out of my own way. And yeah, it's not a scary experience. And putting music out is thrilling, really. It's the first point of feedback that you get, and that's really exciting. So yeah, I'm kind of fine-tuning my my interface with the promotional side of things, but I'm definitely getting better at it.
Rosa, what about the next phase of putting your music out there, the live performance? You're in the studio, and I can't remember the term you used, like semi-live, the way you recorded it. But there's still like a kind of level of perfection that's seems to be a goal of a recording. You can go back, you can polish the sound, you can make it as good as possible. Then you're off into a live performance. There's a little bit more improvisation, working with the vibe and the mood and the crowd. Some noise happens. You kind of play around with it. You incorporate it into your song. How do those two worlds kind of interact for you?
I think the live performance element of playing new music is amazing, because I always say that my songs come alive when I play with my drummer for the first time, because rhythms and things, I really hold on to them. I love them, and I love hearing that back. So that's like a moment of like great satisfaction and excitement for me, because I can kind of hear the song form again. But there's a new level of that when you play it for an audience and you hear it fill a room. And that's an exchange that's really, really exciting as a songwriter. And it's, to be honest, a part of the whole process that I kind of forget about until I experience it again, and I get a renewed, oh yeah, it's lovely when you play music for people, you know? And I think with the guys who are in my band or who play music with me, we had to do obviously a lot of prep to get the album up to a point where we could play it in that kind of semi-live way. We had to be very kind of fluid with each other and very well rehearsed. So we can kind of jump back into that quite readily, which is brilliant. And there's a degree of comfort with playing the music live that's very reassuring and nice, and means you can settle in and really kind of express it to your best ability. So I'm really looking forward to playing a couple of shows and kind of showing off the elasticity of what we've kind of prepared for, if you know what I mean. But yeah, with the semi-live, just to go back to the beginning of your question, with the semi-live recording style, essentially the main body of the album, the guitars, the drums, and the bass, they all were recorded at one time. But then additional vocals, like we only used my original vocals a couple of times, because you really want to communicate the voice as best as possible. And we might have added on then some cellos and different things like that. But the bounce of the album and the kind of fidelity to how it moves is present, and that was really important to me.
I'm going to shift tracks a little bit again, just because I'm allowed to do that. On the intro to this podcast and all our other episodes, we have that short snippet of you singing in Irish, or Gaelga, as us Irish people might refer to it, or Gaelic, as they say over on this side of the Atlantic. Talk to me, well, let me frame it this way. Our last episode we did with Colm Braid and Cleona Nichruli from The Quiet Girl. And Colm describes growing up in North County, in North Dublin as well, but he was in Raheny, closer to the city. with a father speaking Irish and a mother speaking English. And that was your experience growing up. Talk to me about the Irish language. Does that inform your music in any way, or even more broadly, your life in any way? How important is that to you?
Definitely hugely important. Like I see with my sisters as well, that having it was the same setup as your previous guest. And just as an aside, I saw that film and I was blown away by it. But the way we were raised with an Irish speaking dad and English speaking mum, definitely it's kind of materialized in different ways, I think, for all of us. But it was definitely hugely beneficial and very formative. All of my sisters have kind of lots of language proficiency and kind of really good flexibility to pick up things on the hop that in different languages. And they're all very diligent and have a couple of fluent languages in their pocket. That did not materialize with me, but I definitely think that being around a different language structure, like Irish is such a beautifully mindful language. Like it's got mindfulness built in, which I think is amazing. Instead of saying, I am hungry, tá ocras hunger is upon me, tá broner, sadness is upon me. I'm the unchangeable central thing here, and the emotion is something that is visiting me momentarily, and I really like that. And I think it's got an innate calmness to it, an innate beauty to it. There are words in the Irish language like gloacha, it's a word I love so much, gloacha, and it basically means, I'm not even going to describe it properly, but special and beautiful, but none of those words are the actual meaning. It's got its own meaning. And I think the kind of fascination I would have read a lot when I was younger. I really liked poetry and songs, obviously. The fascination I got with Irish, apart from being able to speak with my dad, which is such a privilege, was that sentence structure in different languages is different. So words are malleable and they can be moved around and changed. And I kind of had more of a like Play-Doh kind of interaction with it. I think having Irish in our household was great for all of us, to be honest.
So we're going to take another musical interlude here. We're going to play Dancer, and we will be back shortly.
You should ask a dancer. They know what to do. I guess there's your answer. You just have to move. You should ask a dancer.
That was Dancer, and my take from that was interesting because I got the sense that you were trying to communicate in that song that the most important thing you can do is move. And that's why we should look to dancers. Is that what you're going for, or am I just misreading this and my usual lyrical incompetence?
No, that's pretty spot on, I have to say. The idea behind the chorus of dancers. So you should ask a dancer, they know what to do. I guess there's your answer. You just have to move. And I suppose that lyric came from a time where I was maybe stalling on some of the aspects of kind of finishing my project. There was a lot going on in my friendship group. There was people kind of moving away. They had taken very different kind of paths to me. I was out doing a creative thing with no feedback for a very long time. And the kind of the stillness of that and the kind of space to think around that maybe had me in a little bit of a bit of a funk. And I kind of have realized over the last couple of years that whenever you're in a funk, the worst thing you can do is sit in it, and any sort of kind of movement to action tends to get you out of it, and it doesn't even have to be a big thing. And I used to dance a lot when I was younger. When I was younger, I thought I would be a dancer. I never sang. I thought that's what I would do. And I think the reason I love it so much, and the reason I love that I did it as a child so much, is it's a very uninhibited medium. You know what I mean? It's, unless you're kind of doing something with prescribed moves or something with a really direct style, which was not my kind of dancing. I think I just kind of let it rip when I was younger. But it's very improvisational, and it's felt, and it's a fluid movement from you, and it's exciting and unpredictable. And I think when I was thinking about the kind of the wallowing, I was thinking about the fact that at one point in my life, I used to just spin around a stage age 6, not worried about what anybody thought or, you know, what I was doing at all. And that's a very free place to be. So that's what dance is about. It's just about motivating yourself to get up and start moving again.
Rose, I want to ask you about what's going on in Dublin these days in music. But before we get into that, I just want to follow up on something Martin said. He mentioned his incompetence. Now, you know Martin for a long time. What can you tell me? You know, what should I know about Martin Nutty? What are some of the secrets here?
You're
That's
only 50%
here now, John.
You're only 50% of the thing here. This episode won't see the light of day, John. You're gonna sink this ship. I'll write you an email.
We'll do that off. They say, like, you know, offline. We'll do that
offline.
So anyway, the music scene in Dublin. What are some of the dynamics of it? What's going on there now? What are you listening to? What's happening in Dublin musically?
So much, and Dublin's only one part of it. Like, you know, over the whole island, it's an insane scene. Like, when I started playing music in 2015, there was some incredible acts around, people doing really, really amazing things. But the quality and the standard of what, you know, musicians who are not that well known are producing in Ireland right now is honestly like jaw dropping, and it's way, way out of proportion with the population of the country. Like, the scene is healthy, the scene is diverse, it's exciting. Listening to loads of different things. Probably the most kind of meteoric person I have kind of witnessed from when I had started playing music is CMAT. I don't know if you've heard of her. But she is basically a larger than life, incredible songwriter with a massive voice and a massive stage presence. And basically you wouldn't know how far she could go. And it's a really exciting thing. It's a really exciting thing to observe, I have to say. And she's doing amazing stuff. But there are so many artists that are just absolutely killing it. I always dread this question because I know after I finish answering it, I'll think of like 10 I think are amazing. But the trad scene in Ireland at the moment is insane. There's bands like Lemoncello who are doing incredible stuff. Ye Vagabonds, just beautiful, especially if any of your listeners are really into kind of traditional Irish music. There's a whole world of Irish music being created that has its origins in traditional Irish music, but with the kind of lyricism of like Joni Mitchell, or, you know, it's amazing. There's some amazing stuff going on. So it's in rude health, and if you're ever in Ireland for that purpose or for a holiday, there is some amazing things you can see, and they will be in small venues with incredible talent. So yeah, it's really good.
Dublin's an increasingly cosmopolitan city. People are immigrating into Ireland and into Dublin. Are they bringing musical traditions that you're touching up against or that influence you at all?
I would imagine so. Like, I haven't spent too much time on the live scene in quite a while, and even my ability to attend gigs has been kind of, you know, limited to whenever I'm up there. So I'd say I'm not even in the know, to be honest, about how much how many influences are landing.
Just talking about the density of music in Ireland. Mm-hmm. Have you any kind of thoughts about why that would be? Why do you think Ireland is unique in that respect, and what are you comparing it
to? Hard to know. I mean, I think there's a very kind of, I mean, with writers and everything like that, there's always been a huge kind of quality of art coming out of Ireland, and with artists as well, visual artists. I don't know. I don't know why it is that way, but I without getting too much into Irish history and guessing, I would say that art is kind of what you make if you have something to say or something to express. And I think if you're living in a system that's oppressive, or once upon a time your people were, that is a vehicle for expression and for rebellion, really. And I think that's maybe in our DNA at some point. I'm not sure. I'm just speculating. But art is the ultimate statement of self. And I think if you're in a country whose self is being kind of kept under wraps, that's how it gets out. And I think with the music scene in Ireland right now, the bar is so high, and people are engaging with it, and it's a massive part of the night culture in Ireland, that it just raises all boats. Like, you can't bring out not well produced, not well thought through music, because it's not going to get anywhere. So the temperature just keeps rising and rising, and the frogs getting boiled in the best way possible. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. It's kind of two-pronged.
I didn't understand that you like boiled frogs, so that's a new revelation,
Yeah, that can be the tagline.
Well, Rosa, that glowing Irish Times review I mentioned described a wild card as the high watermark on the album. So let's take a listen to some of that. What's a line that from that song that kind of resonates with you, or that you think about when you think back on that song? Is there a verse that says it best for you?
I quite like the line, "It takes two to drive this float." Again, I think it's kind of written in the same sarcastic tone as the other one we've pointed out from Deciding to Change. So I think I'm kind of painting myself as quite a negative person here, but I do like that lyric. It's yes, I'll perk up, tell me a joke. It takes two to drive this float. So it's like putting the responsibility on somebody else to kind of lift your spirits and to get you in the mood to do anything. The musical kind of or the rhythm and stuff in Wildcard is something that for me stands out from the rest of the songs on the album. And I think the kind of bounce in it and the upbeat nature, as upbeat as my music ever is very. It's a really nice space for me, and it kind of I got really into the musicality of that song, where I'm kind of more lyric led, and I think it's got good energy in it, and it reminds me of going out and how I feel when I'm going out, and the kind of having to come up to a new social kind of plane when you're out at night and you're kind of meeting people and different stuff like that. So the song actually captures how I feel about that without actually demonstrably saying anything to anyone else. And that's why I like that song. I've got kind of a fun interaction with it, where it really feels like I said what I was trying to say, but in the musicality of the song rather than the words, for once.
When I was hearing the song and then looking at the lyrics, that's the same line I went back to. That image of the float, I think, is particularly evocative.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I really like the idea of it, because floats are so camp and and colorful, and they're very interactive and fun, and like there's nothing less floaty about that lyric. So I like it too.
And the word float fits in, the other meanings of float.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So the album's out in the wild now, including obviously Wild Card.
Yes.
Well done, Ryan.
Yeah, I really worked hard on that one. But the obvious question that everybody always asks you is, now what? So now what?
Yeah. Now what? So I didn't stop writing when I finished the album. I was kind of in the right frame of mind to keep going. So I do have some material that I want to explore a little bit more with the guys in the band. Whether that results in a new album or a new release of some sort, I'm not sure yet. But it's something I want to play around with. Like, I'm really excited about. So much time has gone since the album's kind of solidified into a thing that I can kind of understand as a whole now, that I kind of know what period of my life that has represented and what kind of sound and emotion is kind of encapsulated in that, and being able to put a name on that and being able to see it for what it is frees me up to kind of take a step away from it. I think when it's all kind of composite parts and you haven't kind of, polished the edges of something, you could keep writing like that forever. But when you can view it from a bit of a distance, you can kind of see where you want to go after that. And I think some of the music I wrote since then has a different direction to it. So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to playing more with the guys and exploring the songs in a like a rehearsal kind of setup with the guys, because I did a lot of things on my own and then brought it to the band, whereas I'd actually love to kind of feel and tease things out a bit more all together, because I think that's quite collaborative and fun, and it's probably what I enjoyed about the recording process the most. So getting a bit more kind of rough and ready with how I do things and kind of shaking it up and hopefully bringing the songs in a new direction now.
Any plans on taking the show on the road across the pond here to New York and beyond in the US?
Well, I'd love to. I absolutely love coming to New York. I love it so much. So yeah, if there was the opportunity to do that, absolutely. But I think the primary thing now is to kind of play as much domestically as possible and just get comfortable with that and kind of moving in that direction. And then absolutely, John, I'll come on over to New York and have a little Irish stew gig.
Yeah, absolutely. Play for our first live event in person. Well, I think we're getting to the point we're kind of heading towards, future ideas, things coming up. And we would love our listeners to know more about you and to listen to your music. Time for Seamus plug to come in the room, Rosa. What would you like to
Hello, Seamus.
Plug away at and really let our listeners know how to get to know you better?
Sure. Yeah. Well, if anyone's curious about hearing the album, I'd absolutely love for you to do that. So that's available on Bandcamp. On Bandcamp Friday, there is the opportunity to kind of purchase music from all independent artists who are featured there, and they get a full share of that purchase. So it's a really good way to time supporting people whose music you want to support. So that's a really good place to do that for all artists. And then on the 21st of December, for anybody who's in the country or anyone who might be returning home to the country for Christmas, we're having an album launch party in the Workman's Club on the Quays in Dublin, along with an amazing Irish artist called Swimmers Jackson, who's very much actually in the influenced by the kind of Elliott Smith vibe as well. And he's brilliant, like really excellent. And he's got a whole album worth of new material to play. So he's really pumped for the show, and we can't wait to play it either. And it's going to have that kind of Christmas sheen off it too, which will be all fun. And so that's all my plugging. I'm also, I know this isn't a visual because it's a podcast. I am really, really shamelessly wearing my own merch, which is so embarrassing. I'm showing the guys here, right. But it's actually just because our central heating is broken, and it's the warmest jumper I have.
That's the album cover. Very good.
Album cover.
You know, Rosa, it's been great learning about you, listening to your music beyond what I had already known on our beautiful theme song, my favorite song. It's great learning about you, seeing your rave reviews in various publications. I also, in the course of learning about you, discovered a good Thai restaurant in Dubai.
Really?
Because when I put in Rosa Nutty, I got Rosa's Thai in Dubai, known for its nutty flavors. So you never know where these explorations are going to take you.
That was a partnership. It been really long in the making. There was a lot of kind of paperwork and stuff for that, but I finally decided that that's really where I want to put my energy now. So I'm delighted you found it.
Interesting crossover.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. It was so nice.
So with the, the gig and the Workman's Club, I'm just noting that it's December 21st, which is the solstice. I'm not sure quite what to make of that, whether that's some kind of pagan thing going on here, which probably not beyond the realm. But I'd say on behalf of John and me and our listeners, kind of really appreciate you taking the time out to give us a little bit of insight behind the creative process and an opportunity to listen to a bit of your music. And with that, we want to play this episode out with a song of your choice, which we will put right at the very end. So tell us what song that we haven't played already and that you would like to have.
Well, I think we should end on a positive note because I kind of brought us into the trenches there at points. So let's go for Big Kiss, which is a song about not reducing, not letting arguments reduce people to kind of opposing sides, and to being open and to being collaborative even in moments of tension. So it's just about getting along.
That's great. Appreciate that. Let's not be binary, people.
Yes.
Let's embrace it all.
Gray area.
Thanks so much, Rosa.
Thanks, Rosa.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Hey, Martin, that Irish Times review I referenced talks about her debut album that it weaves a kind of spell that will calm the jittery nerves. I think that's something we all need right now. So hopefully Rosa can perform that public service and help us all calm our jittery nerves.
Yeah, I find her music particularly soothing, and I'm not just saying that as a proud uncle, which is obviously what I am, especially when I listen to the creative talent that is my beautiful niece. And for me, I kind of approached this particular conversation with a little bit of trepidation, because the difficulty here is that I know Rosa well, but there's aspects of what she does that I don't really know. And the nice thing about when you're doing this kind of podcast exchange is the opportunity to actually ask questions that you normally wouldn't ask. So the question about how was it growing up in a bilingual household, I don't think I ever asked her that before. But I think it's an important aspect of her identity. And so what I hope for, obviously, for this episode is that we revealed something about Rosa, and certainly given our listeners an opportunity to listen to some great music.
She wasn't forthcoming enough, Martin, about dishing the dirt on you. But, it was really great for us old guys to bridge the generation gap a bit here on Irish Stew. Our audience tends to skew a bit older. So it's great to talk to somebody who's really in a contemporary music scene. Not an area I'm particularly familiar with, obviously, right now. But it was great to, kind of bridge the gap and hear what's going on. The conversation didn't sound that different than when I was Rosa's age.
I'm going to push back on that old guys thing. You can hang on to that moniker. I'll just stiff arm that one for at least another decade anyway. But yeah, certainly, obviously, I'm her uncle and I'm almost 30 years older. So it's always nice to get that different perspective, that perspective from Ireland, that perspective of the music scene, understand the vibrancy of the culture in Dublin right now, which I've remarked on multiple times in recent visits to Ireland. The music scene is great. People go to Ireland to see the scenery, to see the historic sites. But one of the things that you got to do in Dublin is get up to speed on what the gigs are and make sure you hit a gig in Dublin itself.
And really, as Rosa mentioned, all throughout Ireland, north to south, east to west.
Absolutely.
Forget everything. Big kiss, exhilarating. Love you. I hope it doesn't scar.
Irish Stew is produced by John Lee, Martin Nutty, and Bill Schultz. Editing, mixing, and mastering by Bill Schultz. Music on Irish Stew was composed and performed by Rosa Nutty, with Donald Bowens on drums, Cathal O'Riordan on bass and synthesizer. For more on Rosa Nutty's music, please visit rosanutty.com.